Check out today's piece of fan art. It's a custom servant design for Captain Kidd. To be honest, I didn't know much about the guy until Persona 5, and I'm honestly surprised he isn't an official servant yet. His name was William? That's too similar to Billy the Kid. What are the odds? Thank you so much. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. Today, I have another thought-provoking discussion for you all. Sadly, it has to do with new instances of anime censorship, specifically what I'd call petty censorship. On the bright side, this topic has led me to discovering the true meaning, or etymology, of the term manga, which I believe shines a whole new light on the spirit of anime as an art style, and why censoring it goes against the very foundation of our fandom. You see, the most important part of our fandom happens to be the artist. Sure, there's music, writing, animation, and gameplay elements, but at its core, anime-styled art comes down to an artist with a pen and canvas, choosing which contour lines and shading to draw on negative space. It's wild how something so beautiful can be so damn simple. Even if anime studios shut down or manga publishers stop funding new works, so long as we have passionate artists drawing what they love, then the fandom will prevail. I've been meaning to cover more individual artists and their styles, so what I learned for this video may just help speed that along. My brother teaches English over in Japan, and one of his students wrote a piece on the meaning of manga. It's something I hadn't really thought of before, but upon doing so, I found my love for this art all the more potent. Japanese uses 3 different sets of characters for writing. The simpler of the two are hiragana and katakana, which are phonetic. The characters themselves don't mean anything until you arrange them to form words. The more complex aspect of Japanese is kanji, the Chinese characters that each have their own inherent meanings. It's insane, but there are over 50,000 kanji characters out there, way more than the average Japanese person will ever need to learn. Manga is spelled with 2 kanji, one for man and the other for ga. Of the two, ga is the easiest to understand. It basically means brushstroke, or more conventionally, a picture. Perhaps you've heard of the word eiga, which means movie. Well, a movie is just a motion picture after all. The interesting kanji happens to be man. These written characters aren't all completely original. Rather, many of them are more complex forms and variations of basic kanji. The character man, then, happens to derive from the radical for water, and as such, it is essentially a descriptor for water. It's a versatile character that can mean anything from spontaneous, random, impromptu, aimless, unrestrained, involuntary, and whimsical. These descriptors all convey how water is free-flowing, and in a reverent sense, unrestricted. When we put them together, manga literally means involuntary picture. This interpretation goes all the way back to the early 19th century, when it was associated with our buddy Katsushika Hokusai, one of Japan's most beloved artists. In context, it didn't refer to comics as we think of them now, but rather images that come about through an artist's free-flowing creativity. It's a picture that benefits from an artist's whimsy, their instincts and unique sensibilities, rather than deliberate control or restraint. Censorship is the exact opposite, the altering and conforming of ideas to fit a specific agenda. Most commonly, it involves changing artwork that could be considered offensive or inappropriate. It channels all that free-flowing creativity to match a single point, going against the very idea that manga was coined upon. It's one thing to admit that censorship sucks, but I never would have imagined that the very etymology of manga as an art form was antithetical to censorship. This leads me to our next topic, petty censorship. Oftentimes, censorship is rather concrete when it comes to anime art. Usually it dictates that artists not show genitalia, intimacy, or other suggestive elements. The artist's unique style isn't necessarily relevant. It's more about ensuring that we can't see any swimsuits or cleavage or certain kinds of outfits. Petty censorship takes things further, policing the more detailed aspects of how an artist draws. It takes issue with the sorts of things we normally appreciate about an artist. The subtle way they shade their characters, the quality of their lines, and how realistic they are. To a casual audience, such changes might not ever be noticed, but just because you can't identify and isolate any given detail, that doesn't mean those details aren't present, adding to the overall look of a finished work. I go back to this example a lot, but it's honestly one of the most infuriating, one that inspired me to make this channel. The English version of Tokyo Mirage Sessions became infamous, or perhaps meme-worthy, over censoring what people jokingly call vagina bones. You see, we humans have what's called a pelvis, the complex joint where our legs unite with our torso at the spinal column. We have genitals between those legs, located where the abdomen dips down and forms a V-like shape. Some people call this the Mound of Venus, a triangular concavity constructed between our hips and crotch. An artist truly in touch with human anatomy will know that, on a slim person at least, this triangular dip creates shadows. Thus, anime artists may find themselves using shading or contour lines to represent this element for realism. As you can see, Tsubasa's model in TMS used to have this shading, two little triangular shadows emerging from above her shorts. Along with covering up her cleavage, though, Nintendo also decided to erase these shadows for their Western release. Why? Aren't those shadows just an element of reality? Well, as I said in a previous video, it's all fun and games until someone faps. Turns out, this Mound of Venus is rather fetishized, admired by fans for indicating how low a character's pants or skirt rises. It harkens reminder that, just a few inches lower, is the coveted groin. We can see this fetish in characters like Shimakaze, who wear panties that rest on their hip bones to emphasize this V shape. Therefore, someone at Nintendo must have reasoned the presence of these shadows was too provocative, despite being something completely natural for the human body. It's like getting angry that someone has abs, and hiring an editor to airbrush them out of a photo. It seems being a more detailed artist allows you to make sexier things. Oh no! A near-identical incident occurred in Japan when the company Nishiura Mikan chose Love Live's Chika to be their ambassador. This involved producing artwork of Chika holding an orange, her favorite food, for an ad campaign in Numazu. I guess a feminist group took issue with this art, made by Love Live's official artist no less, for featuring a crease in Chika's skirt where her legs meet. Admittedly, this sort of crease isn't exactly realistic. It implies that very light fabric is being kinda vacuum sealed to her body, and the precision of that shadow almost creates the illusion that we can see straight through the skirt. To get this crease in reality, you'd need to actually tuck the skirt between your legs, pinching it in place, and even then, it likely wouldn't be so precise. Even so, this was a nice artistic decision that I feel looks quite flattering, and it's frustrating to see people trying to fix the art by making her skirt more robust. Looking at this edited version, I can confidently say that it's less dynamic and less expressive. The same sensibilities that created Chika's skirt crease are the same ones that created the rest of this amazing artwork, so without the crease, it just feels out of place. Plus, there's nothing wrong with her being attractive. It doesn't have to be skeevy. The last example I want to bring up is Genshin Impact. It's kind of a loaded example, really, since it's actually 3 instances in one. Within the past few months, MiHoYo has been updating the game, changing things both huge and minor. I can't tell if these changes are being dictated by the CCP or by the game's Chinese fanbase, but it seems the whole world is paying the price for it. As a midriff connoisseur, the most frustrating change was to this girl's navel. As you can see, she's wearing a body stocking, a skin-tight mesh akin to Tharja or Skahak. The original art is more detailed, properly shading the curvature of her stomach, including what we call a clothed navel, where the cloth dents inward kinda like a wet swimsuit. It's a stylistic choice that I very much appreciate in this art, regardless of whether it's present in her in-game model. Sadly, it's almost as if some poor intern was asked to paint all that detail out in Photoshop. Like seriously, it's just a solid color now. Not only is there no navel, but there's also no volumetric lighting. I worry about the in-game models too, as MiHoYo's also censored the shading for shoulder blades. I sincerely doubt they're just trying to save on processing power by deleting textures. Someone must have thought erasing those 2 shadows would make her more appropriate, even though the same region of skin is still being exposed either way. The more recent and famous censorship comes from these new outfits, which are completely replacing the old ones in the game's Chinese release. They tried to slip this by in the US by saying these outfits would only be optional, but considering all cutscenes and promo material will be using the new ones worldwide, it still sucks. To be fair, a lot of these new outfits seem superficially different. There are actually parts of the new ones I find more attractive, since not all of them are just covering up cleavage. Still, when you feel the need to censor shoulder blades, it follows that your logic of what is and isn't appropriate will be confusing. This controversy just adds to the reasons I don't play the game. I'll stick with Phantasy Star Online, which lovingly gives me bikini armor, thank you very much. Now, one of the things I always hear when I complain about petty censorship is that if the changes are so minor, why am I getting so worked up about them? It assumes that it's petty of me to be upset over something as small as a pelvic shadow or a single line representing a belly button. To that, I have two things to say in response. First, if you're gonna call me out as petty for caring about these changes, you absolutely have to admit that it's equally as petty for the companies to make those changes in the first place. I didn't start the fire. Someone looked at those shadows and found them important enough to censor. If it's enough to make them worked up, I should be allowed to get just as worked up as they are. Second, if I haven't made myself clear yet, it's the small details that truly define anime. Those small little lines or shadows that an artist freefully put on canvas because it just felt right to them. Compared to other works, anime and manga art is relatively simple. It uses very few contour lines to make wildly expressive characters. Thus, the slightest change in angle of someone's eyes, nose, feet, hair, etc. has a huge impact on our impression of the work. If I appreciate even the most subtle artistic detail, I'm sure as hell gonna defend it from censors. The way said details are lazily getting erased or covered up is truly an affront to the very spirit that manga art derives from. These small changes might not affect you right now, but it's only a matter of time until something you love falls into the crossfire. That said, I have to acknowledge a rather harsh truth. Art, when made exclusively for oneself, is really no different than masturbation. That's not inherently a bad thing. If it makes you happy, go for it. If you're going to develop the skills to create beautiful art, it should be your choice what you use that talent for. Much to my dismay, if your dream art is taking moderately sized anime girls and drawing them more busty and voluptuous than intended, that's totally your right. The beauty is that oftentimes, we actually want to see what an artist naturally prefers to draw. Buying merch, prints, or donations is a way of saying, I love your art just the way it is, so please keep it up. The ability for an artist to be fully funded making art exclusively according to their whimsy is truly a blessing. It's like someone paying to watch you masturbate. It's a win-win all around. Sadly, that's not an option for a lot of people, though. Often, we need to make art catered to a client's specifications, or put out popular content that audiences want to see. It's a twisted relationship between artist and audience, where the client wants the artist for their skills, but only within certain guidelines. It's not necessarily malicious, but it can be. Commissions can be wholesome or hellish depending on how strict a client is, making harsh demands without having the artistic know-how to create art themselves. By that same token, an artist's whims aren't always perfect right out of the gate. Your first instinct or draft may not always be best. You can't just fling wet paint at the wall and call it quality anime. As an artist, you need to study different techniques and styles before establishing a feel of your own. You need to follow certain rules of anatomy, or at least it helps to know those rules so that you can break them by choice. Editing is also an important process, shifting things around to see what works best. This leads people to try to defend censorship, advocating that artists can often create better, more compelling work when forced to overcome setbacks or limitations. There's certainly some truth to this. For instance, anime's dynamic and extreme movement is the product of using a lower frame rate to save on animation costs. In opposition, however, what seems most important to me is that the artist is struggling with and overcoming their own obstacles, rather than dealing with obstacles deliberately placed in their way by overbearing censors. Basically, we have enough limits as it is without disrespectful critics intruding on an artist and their work. That's why I feel censorship is so insulting. It's not done out of love or appreciation. It just exploits an artist's talent with the attitude that they're simply making a product, and not an expression of their passions. With that, I want to bring the conversation to you guys. What do you think of these cases of petty censorship? How should artists mediate the barrier between making art for others and making art for themselves? Also, would you like me to start making spotlight videos on different artists and what makes them so beloved? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Before we go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 supporters. Video Gamer 75, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Johnny Tsunami, Bricken, Happy, Sakura-chan, Caitlin P, Vladimir Rovna, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!